The late night boys are back at it again and doing it for the art. All for the art. Welcome to the Pod People, the show where the only thing that matters is artistic integrity, even at the cost of human life. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm joined by my fellow murder artists, Ben Sheets.
The podcast medium is just a postmodern expression of contemporary subjects on art words.
Well, I liked where you were going with that for a little while. And Eugene is also here.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just busy eating some of my delicious wheatgrass pancakes. So I was caught up in all that. Let me wash it down.
Don't forget the garbanzo bean omelet.
Oh, I have a
or was it
garbanzo
chickpea
bean,
omelet?
garbanzo bean smoothie right over here. So let me just take a little chunk of that. Health.
You guys got some Coke?
Actually, I got a big bag of crank. If we're going to be up late recording this podcast, I need to be hyped up. Well, tonight we're actually recording from Eugene's house, which is a change of pace for us. It feels weird to be sitting here at this table.
Yeah, I'm sitting in this very extremely low chair.
You're
feeling comfy as hell.
You're like a fucking lazy boy pulled up at the dining room table, and me and Eugene are over here in regular chairs.
It's the king's chair over there.
The throne.
It's a new table, so we had to get familiar with it, comfortable, find out where to put our microphone stands.
Yeah, it took us like 10 minutes to set up our microphone stands. Well, Ben, I hear you've got some news for us. Why don't you fill us in?
Yeah. In the world of art house cinema, which is very fitting for our art house art episode.
What is art?
What is art? What are frogs? The director of Call Me By Your Name, I believe his name is
Luca Guadagnino? Guadagnino? If I'd watched the Oscars, I would know this.
He is putting out a Suspiria remake this year, produced by Amazon Studios, actually.
Trying to get in on that Netflix money.
Yeah, but apparently there was a cinema convention, CinemaCon, and they showed a clip from Suspiria over a lunch, and it might have been one of the most graphic scenes from the movie. Which I find hilarious that they did over lunch.
Yeah, right, while people are eating.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the idea of a Suspiria remake and whether you guys think it has potential, what you guys would want to see in a remake of Suspiria.
Well, I got to see Suspiria for the first time like 3-4 years ago. One thing I like, just in the article that you sent to us, is that he isn't trying to imitate everything about the original. He got Tom York, of Radiohead fame, to help do the soundtrack, because I think that's one of the
Johnny Greenwood was busy, I guess.
Yes, well, working on another Amazon movie that we just saw, You Were Never Really Here, so
yeah,
really
great
good.
movie.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that a lot.
Amazon seems to be they're picking them well, with an odd Woody Allen movie put in there.
Bezos eats one iguana, and now he has the power of filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really the grand.
That's where the power of filmmaking lies.
Yes,
devouring
it's the
exotic
secret.
animals.
If we want to stop being hacks, all we have to do is eat iguanas.
I'd be looking forward to it. I thought that the original was really good. I think that remakes can be appropriate if it's been enough time where like no one.
It'll definitely be interesting seeing their approach to it, because
It seems like they're trying to take
anything,
a totally different approach.
What I remember of the original Suspiria, and I like a lot of Argento stuff, but Suspiria has beautiful, gorgeous, crazy visuals and one of the dumbest stories.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, actually. Like, it might be somewhat of a hot take in the film world, but Suspiria is one of my least favorite Argento films. I really like Argento. Like, Deep Red is awesome. Opera is really great. Tenebrae is really great. And Suspiria just doesn't really do it for me. Like, the best things about it are the production design and cinematography, and the Goblin soundtrack.
Yeah, the Goblin soundtrack is really fantastic. There's sequences in Suspiria that are like peak Argento.
For sure.
Like the whole scene where she's like falling through the ceiling window into like the very colorful room.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, full of like barbed wire or whatever. Yeah. I'm curious. I also thought it was interesting that they're trying to really not copy the original. Guadagnino, or however you pronounce his name, says that he's trying to avoid the really strong primary colors that you see in the original one, and try to make it more dark, which could be
Worries
good.
me.
It could be good. It could be bad.
If anything, Argento is known for the vibrant colors in his film.
Right, and that's one of my favorite things about Suspiria. So I don't know. It sounds interesting, the way they describe the scene that was screened with a dancer being thrown around a mirrored room telekinetically. I quote, "Shrieking in pain, the dancer's body was twisted and folded into a number of unnatural positions. Eventually, Johnson's routine came to an end," Dakota Johnson, "and what was left in the other room was basically just a crumpled, leaking mess that used to be a human being." That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that sounds crazy gruesome and very funny to show to thousands of people eating food
over a lunch, and they showed it. But yeah, the Twitter's apparently been blowing up. People who went to CinemaCon saying that people were turning away from the screen and that it's one of the most amazing graphic things they've ever seen. People were getting up and walking out. That's the kind of shit that I'm into, because if people hate it that much, then I feel like I'm gonna like it.
I hope so. It's very weird to me that this director is doing it, because Call Me By Your Name is not a horror movie.
Well, I'm
No.
sure it's a horror movie
mean,
for the God-loving conservative Americans of this country, like James Woods.
Oh yeah, I bet
yes.
James Woods hates it.
Right. It's the death of society, that movie. So
This is the liberal agenda.
He doesn't have a problem being in a movie where a big vagina grows on his stomach and he shoves videotapes into it. But God forbid those gays
They wore
in
gay
Italy.
videotapes.
Yeah, it was a vagina on his chest, not a butthole. Make America great again.
well, I have still not seen Call Me By Your Name, but
I still haven't either.
from clips I have seen, it looks really nice, and so I wonder how some of that visual flair might be transferred.
I actually did see it, and it was not good. In my opinion,
Yeah, I think you're in the minority.
It's a lot of just super rich kid with no problems moping around, and then getting kind of creepily hit on by Armie Hammer, who is a grown adult, and the kid is like 16 or 17. And it's very uncomfortable in that respect, and people keep brushing off that fact.
It's the greatest love story of our generation, Ben.
Statutory rape is cool, guys.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see when what this Suspiria remake is going to be like. I'm not going to write it off just because Call Me By Your Name was not a horror movie, because I think we've especially seen in the last couple of years that people who do not normally make horror movies have made some fucking great horror movies.
I just hope it's not pretentious, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's my worry, especially that with the fact that they're not using vibrant colors, that kind of makes me worried.
Well, that doesn't make me think it's going to be pretentious. That makes me think it's going to be too grimdark.
Well, I mean, self-seriousness and grimdarkness kind of go hand in hand. I hope it's not a dour exercise.
Well, I guess we'll see. I did not see. Is there a release date for this?
2018 sometime.
Sometime this year.
Apparently, David Gordon Green was originally going to direct it.
fall of 2018. It says on the very bad poster.
Ugh.
Yeah, God, I hope the movie's not as bad as this poster.
Yeah, this poster is just like
it's a very, very fat S.
Yes,
spray painted on concrete.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump into our theme for the evening. We're doing something a little different this time. We're exploring a couple of films in which the desire to create art drives people to murder. And we're going to be starting with a review of Roger Corman's Bucket of Blood from 1959.
Yeah. Bucket of Blood is a movie about this guy who is a busboy, essentially, at this coffee shop.
The Yellow Door, I think.
Yellow Door.
It's like a cafe / art club where just a bunch of beatnik artists hang out.
The way they introduce it right at the beginning of the movie is great. It's this guy reciting the most pretentious poetry I think I've ever heard. With a saxophone player just like
noodling in the background.
Yeah, noodling behind him. What a funny way to like set up the scene.
I would like to read a sample from said poem.
Oh, please
because
do.
It cannot be stated enough how funny and pretentious this is. It begins, "I will talk to you of art, for there is nothing else to talk about, for there is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art. Burn gas, buggies, and whip your sour cream of circumstance and hope. And go ahead and sleep your bloody heads off. Creation is, all else is not. Creation is graham crackers. Let it crumble to feed the creator. Feed him that he may be satisfied. The artist is, all others are not." It goes on for quite a bit longer. I'm not going to take up our time, but
the thing is, it didn't bother me in the movie because, like, you can tell, like, they want us to be in on the joke.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, this is fucking satire in its highest form. And it's also done over the opening credits. So it creates a nice little introduction as we sort of pull out from this guy and see this very snooty beatnik art club. And we see the opening credits and see our main character, Walter, going around and clearing tables. Before we get too heavily into this movie, I think we should talk a little bit about Roger Corman and who he is for people who might not be familiar.
So Roger Corman is essentially the godfather of B movies. He had a stint in the 60s where he directed some movies, but primarily he's known as this big producer of hundreds of B movies and
his IMDb
genre films.
His IMDb lists him as the producer of 417 films over the course of his career, which is crazy. He's been working for fucking ever. He did his directing stint for a little while. I think he directed like 30-something films.
Something like that.
He did a lot of Vincent Price movies in like the 60s. Like Mask of the Red Death and stuff like that.
The movies by him, directed by him, that I've seen are all fantastic.
He did the original Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes, which is incredible, and I would absolutely recommend, especially for Jack Nicholson, who plays the crazy dentist.
I've never seen the original. I love the remake with Rick Moranis.
Jack Nicholson goes like full sadist as the dentist in the 60s version. I think is
Jack Nicholson's
awesome.
Great at that.
Yeah. He's mostly known as a producer of a lot of big movies, and he gave a lot of directors that we have come to be known as household names, you know. Your Scorsese's, your Peckinpahs, your your Lucas's, even Spielberg. I think Duel was produced by Roger Corman.
I think you're right.
Yeah, he gave these directors their start, and he's hugely influential in American movies.
Yeah, and I mean, he in his later career produced a shitload of like those really, really terrible like Asylum style sci-fi movies, like fucking Sharktopus and like Dino Croc versus Crocagator and really crazy dumb shit like that. Because I think Roger Corman was just like, I'm gonna give anybody a chance to make their movie, which is pretty cool, even if a lot of those movies are hot steaming piles of garbage.
I'm sure a lot of it was money too, you know?
Of course.
Easy money. He can just put his name on it. Doesn't really have to do much, most likely.
Yeah, and I don't think, B movies would be the same without him. So he's very significant in cinema history. But let's get back into Bucket of Blood. So as Ben said, it's about a busboy, a sort of simple-minded busboy who works at this art cafe, who wants more than anything to be an artist, but he's not creative at all. It starts with him buying this big lump of clay and trying to form it into a bust, and he just can't do it because he has no talent.
Because he tries and he makes a sort of face out of all of it, but
just
it's so...
a super crude face.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Holes
just like
for eyes.
2 holes and a line for the smile, and it's just he's so invested in it, but yeah, he just can't do it. He's too dim-witted.
I love how the inciting event of this movie is just kind of a comedy of errors. Walter, I think his name is.
Walter Paisley.
Yep. He comes home to work on this crude sculpture, and his next door neighbor, the landlady, her cat is missing. And so he starts hearing this cat meowing wildly while he's trying to work. And at the same time, he's boiling water?
Yeah.
And
boiling water, sculpting, and trying to shut out the sounds of this cat.
Yeah, so he's trying to multitask and really failing at every step. But the cat keeps meowing. So in this frantic panic, he grabs a nearby knife from the kitchen as he's grabbing the boiling water, and he kind of just stabs at his wall to try to free the cat. And
yeah, he tries to cut the cat out of the wall with a knife, and he just stabs the cat.
Just immediately. Well, he has the thinnest walls too, because A, he can stab through his walls, but B, he can also just like punch through them.
Yeah, he like smacks at it with his hand and it breaks.
Which makes you question why he wouldn't just do that to begin.
And he pulls out this really terrible fake looking cat doll.
Yeah, with a knife in it.
With a knife stuck in it. And rather than go tell his landlord what happened,
he tries to hide the evidence by covering the cat in clay, pretending it's a sculpture.
And he takes it to the Yellow Door the next day, where the owner and this other girl who Walter's in love with see it, and they're blown away by the lifelike realism of this cat. The anatomy's perfect, as they say. It's just this dead cat with a knife sticking out of it.
I love how they just leave the knife in it.
Yeah, he doesn't take the knife out. It's just a dead clay cat with a knife.
Yeah, they ask him what the piece is called, and he's just like, dead cat. It's called Dead Cat.
And so he convinces them to let him put it up for display in the cafe and try to sell it. And it's a big hit, and everybody's amazed.
And they want to know what his next piece is, so, you know.
Meanwhile, there is an undercover police investigation of the Yellow Door because it's been discovered to be somewhat of a heroin den for all of these beatniks. which is really funny. I like in the opening scene, there's the one table of guys wearing like these fleece jackets and like Civil War hats. And they're just talking to this chick and like, yeah, we're going to show you how to live the real beatnik lifestyle.
Well, yeah, those two characters are like constant comic relief throughout the film, which is, you know, it's already a funny movie, but they play these like over the top druggies. They kind of just seem like stoners, even though they're supposed to be like heroin junkies.
Yeah, they're like, man, I'm way too far out. That's one of my favorite lines. One of the women who frequents the cafe gives Walter some heroin because she's in love with his art. And
after like aggressively flirting with him.
Borderline sexually assaulting him, I would say.
Yeah. She's like, my pussy is so wet for you. I saw your dead cat and now I just need that Walter Paisley.
And one of the undercover cops follows Walter back to his house and confronts him. And when he pulls his gun on Walter to try to arrest him, Walter panics, which is also very funny because he's just standing there going, you're going to shoot me. I just know it. You're going to shoot me. Please don't shoot me. And he has like a large flat skillet, I guess, that's used for making pancakes.
Right. It almost doesn't even, it shouldn't count as a pan. Cause
it doesn't have a lip at all. It's literally just like a flat pan with a handle on it.
Which I would feel risky making pancakes in.
Yeah, if you over pour the pancake mix, it's just gonna spill all over the place.
Exactly. There's no barriers, no protection.
But he, in self-defense, bashes this cop over the head with this big pan and kills him. So he covers him in clay.
At the yellow door, like, there are some rich patrons coming along saying they'll pay a lot of money for these statues because they think Walter is this like brilliant art master.
And that the statue of the murdered cop looks super derpy. Everybody's just like in total shock and awe, like they think it's perfect, but it's also so horrifying they can't look at it. So it's even more like provocative. And
he just calls it Murdered Man.
Murdered Man, continuing his trend of lack of creativity. At a certain point, his boss, the owner of the Yellow Door, realizes what's going on when he accidentally knocks over the dead cat and a piece of the clay breaks off and he sees fur coming out. So that cues him into the fact that Walter's sculptures are just corpses covered in clay. But he reluctantly doesn't tell anybody because he's making a lot of money off of selling the sculptures.
Yeah, when the money's coming in, why fuck with it?
Exactly, because like you said, there's all these hyper rich patrons who are willing to pay hundreds of dollars for these works of art.
Well, the part I love about that is when he first puts the cat in the Yellow Door, he's like, yeah, we'll split whatever you get 50-50. And then the rich patron offers him like $500 for it.
And he gives Walter 50.
Yeah. And instantly Walter thinks he's like this super rich art elite.
Yeah, he's like, wow, I got $50 for my sculpture.
He immediately buys like the nicest suit he can find.
Yeah, it does not take long for him to absorb himself in the whole beatnik lifestyle. Because it seems to be what he craves. It feels so, I don't know what the word is, but almost like prophetic, like the way they show this whole art scene and how seriously and they all take themselves and
all the
organic shit that they eat.
Well, that's like the real satire of it all is like all of these really self-important, pretentious artists, like that poem that I read from earlier, that think that art is the highest form of expression, which I mean, I as an artist, I agree with, but there's definitely
a self-seriousness.
That a lot of artists have that I absolutely still exists today, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. Like, the movie feels super current in that respect. The satire felt just as relevant today as ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Like these super pretentious artist types, especially the poet, who's the most over the top, remind me of people that we went to school with, Like
Yeah.
these people absolutely still exist. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to, express something with your art, but the pretension is laughable, honestly, with some of these folks.
Yeah. So from the murdered man, he ultimately, beyond being an artist, he wants to impress this girl Carla, who works at the Yellow Door.
Yeah. I don't know what she does there, though. She's always just like hanging out at the tables with the other people, but she does work there.
I thought she was like married or a co-owner. She's not married, but like a co-owner or something with the guy, because she's like making decisions with him. He's trying to impress her, and she suggests that he do a female figure. So
and all the beatniks are like, you gotta do nudes. You're not a real artist unless you do nudes. This model who hangs out in the Yellow Door offers to model for him, and so he strangles her and covers her in clay. And I don't know, like...
the meanest model out there.
Yeah, she's super rude. I don't know how he's hardening these statues. I don't think he's firing them in a kiln, but they still break when they're knocked over.
He just has a torch.
He just leaves the oven on and sets them in front of it. It's really funny to see how he sort of becomes inducted into this pretentious art community by the people who openly mocked him before, and as soon as he creates something, they start lauding him as like the greatest artistic genius of all time. The poet guy even writes an equally pretentious poem about him. Walter starts wearing berets because this was the 50s, so all artists have to wear berets. That's how people know that you're a real artist.
That's a fact. That's just science. So he makes another statue of this woman. Yeah, he wants to have a show, right, where he shows multiple of his statues. Because the owner of the Yellow Door is like, instead of just keep showing, one statue at a time, we should show a whole series of them, kind of in hopes that like Walter would take so much time that he would get caught before he was able to make too many more of these. But it kind of backfired because Walter makes these in like a day, I guess. He makes them in a matter of a couple of hours.
He's very quick at covering the bodies with clay.
Yeah.
He gets drunk at that party, and on his way home accosts a construction guy and cuts his head off with a circular saw.
Which I thought was fucking awesome.
And then he just coats the head in clay.
Yeah, it's the goofiest facial expression
Yes.
I think I've ever seen. Closest analog is like, do you guys remember that statue that was like a meme on Twitter for a while, where it's like a bust of some dude's head and he was just making the dumbest face imaginable?
Yeah,
it
I
looked
think
exactly like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, even the murdered man does too. Like, these just look derpy as shit, which is really funny because they're supposed to be like horrifying, but they're laughable to look at just because they're really cheap. I mean, this is a B movie and it had very, very low budget, so it's super over the top and campy.
Well, and that's the thing too, it knows it's a horror comedy, so skipping on the horror elements is not too much of a mark in my book,
No, absolutely not. Like, it's very funny, and it's only like an hour and 5 minutes or something like that.
It's a
very
super short movie. Both of these movies we watched today are very short. It's so well structured where, it's kind of constantly a comedy of errors, where Walter is, at the beginning at least, just accidentally stumbling his way into murder.
Yeah. When he you can tell that at first he struggles with it, with his conscience, but then he gets so wrapped up in the art world that he feels like at a certain point he starts to think that he is actually doing people a favor by turning them into art because it's ensuring their immortality, after he's been talking to the super pretentious poet.
The poet's flowery prose pushed him into interpreting it the wrong way and killing people for
Right,
his
so
art.
he himself gets very self-righteous about it later. And when he asks Carla to marry him and she says no, he tells her that he's going to make a statue of her to make her immortal. Shortly thereafter, at the show, somebody, I think, rubs a little bit of clay off of one of the fingers.
Yeah,
of the woman.
they see a fingernail, like an actual fingernail in the statue of the woman.
And so they immediately realize that all of his statues have corpses in them. And so they form a lynch mob to chase Walter down.
Yeah, while he's chasing Carla
Which
the
is
whole time.
which is a very funny scene where it's him chasing her and then a mob chasing him.
Yeah.
Just like through a warehouse.
Yeah, it's very good.
And the poet is wearing sandals with his tuxedo that he was wearing to the party.
Apparently, I was reading that that guy showed up that way with a tuxedo and sandals to the premiere, and people were like, "Oh man, he's in character. That's so cool." But in reality, he just had to wear sandals so much during the production that like his feet were so
swelled
swollen
up.
that he like couldn't take them off.
Oh my god!
I think it was just because he couldn't wear regular shoes because
yeah.
his feet were too swollen from wearing sandals
Ugh.
too much.
Jesus.
I just thought that was too good. This mob is chasing him, and he's like, "I know how to make a great grand finale that people won't forget." And so he essentially just runs back to his house and like puts a little bit of clay on his face and then hangs himself.
He's being tormented by the voices of the people that he's killed, and so to immortalize himself, he just smears some clay on his face. Which is, that last shot is very funny where he's hanging and he's just got like a little bit of clay like smeared over the front of his face. Oh man, I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I expected when it started. I think that despite its low budget sort of schlockiness, it's absolutely trying to get at something, which definitely goes to show that regardless of the kind of movies Roger Corman did, that he's by no means a hack.
Did the comedy elements work for you, Eugene?
I think the detail they put into the whole art culture that the main character is trying to be a part of, I think all of that was done really well. Because it's certainly it's satirizing all of this kind of stuff, but Roger Corman is a filmmaker. I mean, I'm sure that he's got a real appreciation for art and everything as well. So
I'm sure that there was something in his mind when he was making this, that as sort of a low budget B movie director, that he probably found himself in these kinds of circles with people who were really really pretentious about like what art was and what it needed to be good. And I think that that's sort of what he's commenting on here, that like somebody can just kill people and cover them in clay and sort of trick these
that's the thing,
super
too.
self-serious people.
This movie came out in '59, which was like abstract expressionism and
Right.
like, so I feel like he was definitely commenting on some of that. And the thing is, like, all the commentary on that with the satire, it feels so current. If anything, this movie has proven that, like, regardless of what time period it is, there's always going to be those pretentious, self-serious people out there.
I think this would be a good film to show in like entry-level art classes in college to sort of help people not take themselves so seriously as artists. Because I think that really ends up doing you a disservice in the long run. Because if you can't have a certain lightheartedness about what you're doing, if you take yourself too seriously, then you're not going to really be able to grow as an artist, I think, because those kinds of people can't take criticism.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the kind of people who get criticized and think that it's the other person that's wrong and that they're not at fault at all. And how are you going to make yourself better if you can't see that something you're doing isn't working? It reminds me of that video that's that you showed me, actually, Ben, that's gotten really big lately, of William Friedkin interviewing Nicholas Winding Refn.
Yeah.
Who Nicholas Winding Refn is calling his film Only God Forgives a masterpiece, and comparing it with things like Citizen Kane and stuff like that, totally seriously, without the slightest trace of irony.
And the whole time, William Friedkin's just asking if there's a doctor around.
It's like, is there a medic around here? This man needs a medic. If you haven't seen that video, I would absolutely recommend looking that up, because it's fucking hilarious. And just like you said, you know, it is the same kind of thing that Roger Corman is showing in this movie, that same kind of self-seriousness and lack of self-awareness as an artist that I think is really integral to being a truly good artist.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think another big theme of this movie is it really comes out during when Carla and Walter are talking right after he asks her to marry him, because she kissed him when she saw his sculpture of the naked lady. So he thought, you know, she was in love with him. And she's like, I love your art, but I don't love you.
yeah, she even says that kiss was for your art.
So it's really interesting to me how, like, this movie plays with the idea of art versus artists, because it seems to say through Carla that, like, the art is, you know, sacred and held at such a high level, even if the artists aren't. But because the art is held at such a high level, that the artist let it immediately go to their head. And there's a danger in that. And like you were saying, you know, that kind of makes for a perfect entry art class movie, you know, because you want to avoid, you know, having the praises of your art affect your ego too much.
Yeah, I interacted with so many of those people in my time in film school, like people who just think that even as a fucking freshman, all they do is create masterpieces. Like, nobody likes criticism. Nobody likes to have their stuff criticized. But especially if you're hearing the same criticisms from multiple people, like, maybe there's something to that. Like, constructive criticism is one of the absolute most important things about creating anything. You gotta see how it works with your audience, and if there's something that's not working, you should probably think about maybe doing something about that, you know? I mean, at the same time, I don't think every criticism is good. Sometimes people just don't get what you're trying to do.
Well, they even play with that in this movie, because at one point the poet and his friends are sitting around a table talking, and they're like, you just have to be aware. And one of the guys at the table is like, aware of what? And they're just like, just aware.
Yeah, the poet says, another quote from the movie, I'm proud to say my poetry is only understood by that minority which is aware.
Yeah, and then the person sitting next to him is like, aware of what? And he's like, just aware.
Just aware.
Which I thought was really funny, but also goes into that idea, you know, like, the idea of not getting it is strange in art, you know?
It is, but it does definitely hold true in certain circumstances. If a bunch of people don't get what you're going for, maybe you need to find a better way to express it. But sometimes people just don't get it. Like, that's definitely a fact. And just because some people don't get it doesn't mean it's bad. Like, I'm sure that there are certain things in this movie that would go over certain people's heads, and they would be like, oh, I don't get that. That's a boring, stupid movie. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess you just don't get it. You know, there's a fine balance. You have to walk the line. There's definitely a middle ground. You can't go too far into, oh, just nobody gets my art. But you also can't be like just taking every single thing that everybody says to heart. So I think that's really the lesson of this movie.
It's so funny is the thing, you know, like we're getting into heady topics kind of here, but like this movie is just simple fun.
It is
at
fun.
Its core, you know.
It's nothing outstanding, I don't think, but it's fun and it's witty and it's short, so it's not any sort of like slog. And I mean, I think it's important even today, just as much today as it was in the 50s when it came out. Roger Corman had some stuff going on in his head that I think is important.
Yeah, well, I feel like I can't really knock it for its imperfections, honestly, because, you know, if anything, this movie just screams, you know, stop taking art so seriously, man. Just enjoy it for what it is. And all of the acting is really solid. I thought the guy playing Walter Paisley had this like weird nervous energy to him.
He's very childish in a kind of obnoxious way. He's all of the characters, I would say, in this movie, except for like Carla maybe, but pretty much all the characters in this movie are really fucking annoying people. The kind of people that I personally would not want to spend any time around, because I would end up just rolling my eyes right on out of their sockets, you know?
Yeah.
But I definitely think that's intentional. That's not a knock, you know? That's the way these characters are written. They're supposed to be annoying.
Exactly,
They're
yeah.
supposed to be insufferable.
I loved the nervous energy of Walter's character, though. Like, he always seemed like on the verge of just like a freak out or an anxiety attack. Like, there's no better example of his manic energy than the scene where he's trying to free the cat, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. That whole scene where he's trying so hard to create something because he wants to be an artist more than anything, and he just can't do it. That frustration is something that I think any artist can relate to, when you're trying so hard to do something and you just can't make it work. I definitely sympathized with his pain in that moment. Do y'all want to rate this?
Yeah.
You can start, Ben.
Sure, yeah. This movie, I thought was fantastic. At, you know, an hour and like 3 minutes, it's brief enough that you can watch it just like any TV show. You know, it's super short, it's digestible, it's a whole lot of fun, and it holds up super well today with all the art stuff. It felt very current, like it could have been released anytime between 59 and now, and a lot of things would still be relevant. I thought the acting was over the top but fun. The guy who played Walter was great. The guy who played the poet was great. And the ideas of self-seriousness in art, I think, are very valid. Yeah, overall, I just think this is a fantastic movie and a great example of exciting, schlocky, late 50s movies that are still kind of focused and grounded. So yeah, I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5.
Well, as someone who isn't very knowledgeable about Roger Corman's career, I guess I always find it's strange to hear how influential his name is, but it seems the movies he created were always that, I guess, schlocky, and I mean, especially with this, that they have a very tongue-in-cheek attitude about the whole thing, which I mean, hey, he obviously was doing something right, and for all these big-name directors to get their start with him, and hey, that he's still kicking. He's like 92, but he's still alive.
Yeah,
so.
it's crazy that he's still alive.
Right, that
It's wild.
I think he is retired at this point.
Oh,
though. I don't think
absolutely.
he's. I think the last.
I would hope so.
I think the last thing he produced was in like 2010 or 11, something
that's
like
still-
that.
that's
But I mean,
pretty
yeah, he went on.
surprising,
He
yeah.
went on a ways, but
And,
I think he's finally put it to rest.
Well, yeah, considering this movie came out in '59,
yeah, God.
working into the 2010s is wild.
yeah.
And
It's a
I
man committed to his craft.
yes, and I think that is because even with the silly just like the plot of the movie, there's still that attention to, again, as I mentioned before, the art culture that shows that there was like a knowledge of all this going into the movie, and it's not just there to lampoon it, but also to sort of analyze it and to say the artists there, are they really as bad as the people that want to be the artists but just aren't good enough at it, rather than just the attitude that is like cultivated in that. And I think, again, yeah, as we mentioned, for an hour, just little over an hour, it still manages to do a whole lot. And I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 for that reason. I think that it's certainly worth watching, and it's funny to know that he just reused a lot of the same sets for his next movie that come out, Little Shop of Horrors. Which
Yeah, it was the same
I'm sure
set
more,
as the Yellow Door. I saw that too.
So hey, good on a man who knows that he can still get a couple more uses out of a thing before getting it done. That's efficiency right there.
That is
So
efficiency.
I can admire it.
I enjoy this movie quite a bit. I don't think it's perfect. There are a couple of narrative things that I felt could have been expanded on a little bit more, especially considering how short it was. I wished for a little bit more, I guess, investigation into what Walter was doing, like the ways in which he was discovered felt sort of convenient, but overall I think it's very witty in its commentary. It's really peak satire, and I definitely think it's still relevant today overall, and that you can still get a lot out of it from watching it, even fucking almost 70 years later, 60, 70 years later. So, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 as well. And so that'll give Bucket of Blood an average rating of 4.2 pods. And now we're going to jump into our second and final film. We've only got 2 for this episode, but 2 films that I think make really good complements to each other.
Pair very well.
Yes, good sister films, even though that they were made many, many, many years apart.
Yeah, in Bucket of Blood, it was all about, critiquing this beatnik artist culture. And in our next movie, Murder Party, it kind of explores and critiques the, I guess you could say, NYU post-grad art world.
Yeah, no kidding. This is the directorial, or the feature-length directorial debut of Jeremy Saulnier, who you may know from his other films Blue Ruin and most recently Green Room.
Both incredible.
Both really, really excellent films. I think I actually saw both of those before I saw Murder Party, and I was very surprised at how comedic Murder Party is compared to the other two, which are
'cause the other
just
two
these
are
really dark, brutal, depressing, brooding movies.
Right. Fun does not really exist.
No.
There's elements of comedy in
I mean,
both.
a little bit, but
I would say more so in Green Room than in Blue Ruin, but there's still hints of comedy there.
There's
it's
little,
more subtle for sure.
Yeah, hints of sort of wittiness, but still very dreary, violent films. And Murder Party is violent too, but much like Bucket of Blood, it's absolutely a horror comedy. It's extremely funny.
Yeah.
It came out in 2007, I believe.
Yep.
And also another very short film, an hour and 19 minutes.
Very low budget too.
Super
You
low
were saying
budget.
its budget was like 200,000 some, right?
Under $250,000, I mean, in its highest estimates. So you can tell it sort of comes across in the production of the movie itself. But I think it all just sort of it feels like feels very. I guess I don't know if B movie's the right word.
Yeah, it
but
is. It
has
definitely does have a B movie quality.
Yeah, it never feels cheap though.
It doesn't feel cheap, but it does have some of the same sort of schlockiness of a B movie.
Yeah.
And it feels like it might have been inspired by Roger Corman
Yeah, definitely.
in a lot of ways.
I definitely saw some Bucket of Blood influences with this.
It's about this sort of loner doofus. I think it would be safe to call him a doofus.
This traffic enforcement agent.
Who on Halloween, on his way home from work, stumbles upon an invitation on the sidewalk that literally just blows under his foot to a murder party, and it says "come alone," and he decides to go, even though it wasn't left for him. That he just stumbled upon it, which I think is a very wild concept. That you just find an invitation lying around, and you're like, "Yeah, fuck it, I'm gonna go to this party."
Right. What a wild leap of logic. It doesn't work like a ticket. You can't just say, if this invitation was on the ground, so that means you have to let me in.
Yeah, it's
here,
not like
man.
you found a winning scratch-off ticket on the ground or something and go redeem it, But he cuts up a cardboard box and makes himself a very cheap, dumb-looking knight costume out of it.
With the biggest greatsword I think I've ever
like
seen.
anime sword level. And I love that he takes the smashed pumpkin on his doorstep that some shithead kid broke and turns it into pumpkin bread
with raisins.
with raisins in it because he doesn't want to show up to the party empty-handed.
Yeah.
I fucking love that scene at the beginning where he comes home with his DVD or his VHSs, and he's going to sit down to watch a movie, and the cat is just in his chair.
Yeah,
and
that's like the inciting incident, essentially. Like, his cat refuses to move from the chair.
And rather than being a normal person and just ousting the cat from the chair, he's just like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna go to this party. I love that scene too, the way the cat just like stares at him and
Blankly,
it keeps cutting back and forth between them. One of the things I noticed is that the cat is listed in the credits, and the cat's real name is Puff Snooty, which is a fantastic name for a cat, and I greatly approve. He gets to the party, which is in like this old abandoned warehouse, and as he walks in, there's just like 5 like you said, NYU post-grad types just hanging around, smoking cigarettes and snorting blow. And as soon as he walks in, they grab him and tie him to a chair.
Yeah, I think they said they were an art collective.
Yes.
But each of them have their own weird costumes on.
What I liked is that a lot of them are wearing costumes from like movies, like movie characters. Like one of the girls is dressed as the replicant chick from the original Blade Runner, whose name I can't remember. One of the guys who just spends most of the first part of the movie sitting on the floor playing a PSP is dressed up as one of the baseball gangsters from the Warriors.
Yeah.
Macon Blair is in this.
As like a wolf man.
He's for those who don't know, he's a frequent Jeremy Saulnier collaborator. I think they were friends in high school. He's in all of his movies and just directed that Netflix movie, I Don't Feel at Home in the World Anymore.
Which in terms of tone, I felt was very similar to this.
It definitely was. I like Macon Blair as an actor a lot.
Yeah.
I think he's always one of the standouts. He's the lead in Blue Ruin, and he does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And he's very funny in this too.
Yeah, he does a great job in this. Essentially, so the guy makes it to this warehouse, and it becomes clear that all of these artists plan on killing him by the end of the night for art.
Right, but what I love is that they don't really know. They don't have like a project in mind. They're killing him for the art, but they don't know.
They just want this grant.
Right, their leader is this sort of hyper pretentious weirdo named Alexander, who shows up with his drug dealer, who he introduces as selling drugs out of the back of his grandparents' pierogi shop. And he keeps talking about how he has all of this money and that he's going to get them a grant from this piece, but they're always just arguing about what they're going to do. Like the Blade Runner chick is like a video artist and she's working on an installation, and there's this other guy who's a photographer, and the baseball kid is a painter. So they just have this very vague idea of murdering for art, but without really any purpose, which I think is really, really funny.
Yeah.
Gives a whole new meaning to doing it for the art.
Yeah, they're definitely winging it, which I found pretty funny.
And much like Bucket of Blood, a lot of the things that happen are just like comedy of errors, like total happenstance.
Well, yeah, one of the first things we see in the movie once he gets kidnapped is, he's tied to this chair, and one of the girls is eating the pumpkin bread that he brought. She asks about the raisins in it, if they're organic or not.
Yeah, she says she's allergic to preservatives and non-organic raisins.
She gets really dizzy.
Yeah, they're like, should we call an ambulance? She's like, no, I'll be fine. I just get really dizzy. And then she falls over and lands on like a piece of metal or something, and it impales her in the head.
Yeah, and she just like busts open her head.
And just dies. And that's before Alexander shows up, so they're just like, oh shit, this is gonna piss Alexander off, so let's just go put her in that freezer over there. And Macon Blair, after she dies, blames the protagonist and says he's gonna kill him by dumping acid all over him. And the jug of acid turns out to be acetic acid, which is just vinegar. They're wondering why he's not like burning, and they're like, I think this is just vinegar.
We're gonna pickle him to death.
Right, we're gonna pickle him to death. Once Alexander shows up, they decide that they're going to wait for the witching hour to kill him. So he's just tied to a chair while they're all just kind of like sitting around spewing pretentious bullshit about their art.
They immediately decide to order food and get drugs.
Yeah, the Alexander's drug dealer brings a bunch of like truth serum.
Yeah, like sodium pentothal.
Yeah, so they all just sit around in a circle on the floor injecting themselves with sodium pentothal and like trying to find out each other's secrets. And Macon Blair is like totally in love with the Blade Runner chick who's not at all interested in him. And he just basically keeps sitting there being like, I love you. You remember that time where we were eating ice cream on top of the water tower and you dropped your popsicle stick? Well, I have that popsicle stick, and just like pulls it out of his pocket in a Ziploc bag.
And then the girl dressed up in the Blade Runner getup, she starts to get into very racy territory, talking about the N-word and making everyone incredibly uncomfortable. And it's weird. They just forget about the guy tied up for a second just so we can have this scene where all these pretentious art people.
Well, they go into a big role with puns for a solid couple minutes.
Oh yeah, and they ask like, who do you think is the greatest artist in the world?
And they all
raise their hands simultaneously and say me. And then when it gets serious, the Blade Runner chick is like, I used to love art, but now I hate it because if it's good, it means that there's no room for me. I want all of the art to be bad so it like validates me, which I think like it's funny to hear it like in the context of the movie, but it's also like so fucking true about a lot of people as artists.
Yeah.
And I will admit something that I have even the kind of bullshit jealousy that I've even experienced myself when I see other people's work that's really good. And I'm like, well, shit. Why isn't my shit that good, you know?
Yeah. There's an element of insecurity with all artists, you know? It's that thing with ego versus actual art. You know?
Right, exactly. Like what art is actually saying something and what art is just completely masturbatory. And these kids are very much the masturbatory type of artists.
Yeah.
The photographer guy has all of his equipment, and at one point he calls in his assistant to help him light the scene, and they're all like, what the fuck is she doing here? And he's like, oh no, it's okay. Like
I have to have an assistant.
I have to have an assistant. She always helps me. I love the scene where the main character escapes briefly. He manages to work his ropes loose, and they're chasing him around, and Macon Blair has a chainsaw, but it's not a cordless chainsaw, so it runs out of cord and just unplugs and turns off.
Yeah.
Which is like a very satisfying subversion of that horror movie trope where the killer's got a chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, convenient that they always have the cordless chainsaw, you know, or they never run out of cord. And then when the guy runs into the closet and he's looking around looking for something and he sees a fire extinguisher and you think, oh, he's going to come out of the closet and blast them with it and disorient them. But he just comes out with an armful of junk and just tosses it on the ground in front of him.
And just like runs and jukes by him.
And then gets recaptured immediately.
Yeah,
and
I
this
thought
time
that
they
was
chain him
hilarious.
up.
I also thought it was really funny. The reason he was able to escape without them noticing is because they got into like a 5-minute argument about what kind of food they should order.
Oh, yeah. And then they just like turn around. They're like, oh, shit. And he's just gone.
Yeah.
And then they're looking around for him, and he hasn't even gone very far. He's just like crouched behind.
Yeah.
He's just like crouched
In the
behind
most
a cardboard
obvious
box.
spot.
This movie is, I think, all about subverting those typical kind of slasher movie tropes, and like in a very funny way, but also in a very realistic way. These fucking artists are completely incompetent in everything that they're doing.
Well, that's the thing. It's very big and campy with the artists, but at the same time, there's a kind of an authenticity to it.
Right, it's like how this kind of thing would actually go if it happened in real life.
Yeah.
But
it gets a little gruesome at the end in the second half, but like even that, it's played not too campy.
Well, it literally, like, almost all of the violence happens through sheer incompetence. And you never really get to see any of these people's artwork. They're always just talking about it.
Well, you do get to see, the Blade Runner
The
girls.
Blade Runner chick, she shows a brief clip of her, like, in her underwear in a bathtub,
Hot dogs
screaming
thrown
while
on
somebody
her.
pours hot dogs all over her. But it gives you the impression that their art is almost certainly as incompetent as their ability to murder somebody, you know?
Yeah.
Because Macon Blair is getting, like, piss drunk. He has, like, a jar of moonshine in a paper bag. He's getting drunk because the Blade Runner chick is fucking Alexander, and he's in love with her. And he's just dumping moonshine all over himself. And he goes outside to smoke a cigarette. And when he lights it up, his face just catches on fire.
Well, I love how he was trying to smoke a cigarette while his Wolfman
mask was
on.
They have the dog that Alexander brings that's named Hellhammer, and it's just like a dingo in a skeleton costume, and they tie it up outside, and at one point they tell the baseball kid to go check on it, and he's just standing outside, like, staring the dog down, going, I hate you. I hate you so much. And then when they go out, or the Blade Runner chick goes outside and sees Macon Blair is on fire, she just runs back inside. She's like, Macon's on fire! And after they put him out, he tries to take his mask off, and most of his face comes with it.
Yeah, I thought that effect was super gruesome.
It's awesome. It's so gross.
And cool. Like, it was obviously all practicals.
Yeah, his face is just melted into this, like, half burned human face and half melted mask.
Yeah, you get like half of the mouth of the werewolf.
Like the nose and mouth are like stuck to his face. Well, at a certain point, they feel like something is fishy with Alexander, and so they inject him with the truth serum because he subtly pretended to inject himself.
Yeah, he took
earlier.
like a pill. And he
injected it into a slice of pizza that he was holding.
Oh yeah,
so
it
looked like he was putting it into his hand, but he injected it into the pizza. But then they stick him, and they're like, "Are you really an artist?" He's like, "Nah, I'm a fry cook. My real name's Tim. I was gonna kill all you guys and then sell your artwork because nobody makes money off their art until they're dead." Which I thought was also very funny and poignant and kind of true.
Yeah. I love how the one character that's set off the most by all of this is the baseball guy who's just been sitting around.
Yeah,
the whole time.
he spends the entire first part of the movie just like totally apathetic. He's like, I don't care what we eat.
He's like, I don't really want to be here.
I'll eat anything. Yeah, I'd rather be at home watching a DVD with my parents. And he's just like playing his PSP the whole time.
Yeah. And then they were saying they wanted to kick him out of the collective. And while he was away, they were just shitting on his painting.
Yeah, they saw him painting and they told him to go outside and check on the dog just so they could stand there and belittle his painting. Yeah. Just like you see super pretentious art people in a gallery doing.
Well, and that says something about the art world too. Like, everyone's eager to shit all over art unless the artist is right next to it.
Right, of course. Well, that's that insecurity, you know, when the artist isn't around, you want to talk shit about their work because it validates your own, you know.
Yeah.
There's definitely that kind of petty cutthroat bullshit in the art world. But before she's killed, the Blade Runner chick manages to unlock the main character, who really doesn't do much most of this movie. He really spends the majority of the movie chained to that chair.
He's sort of he's there as an excuse for us to be around.
Right,
he's like the straight man of the movie.
He's the lens through which we're viewing these other characters. And yeah, he is the straight man, but what's funny is the way he's set up at the beginning is he's established as this really kind of weird, quirky dude. but then when he's put in context with all of these other people, he seems completely normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the thing too. You know, like they set him up as kind of boring, honestly. Like he's just sitting alone with his cat watching VHS tapes by himself. He's a TEA officer who, in his own words, said if he died, no one would really care.
Right, because he spends his whole day writing people tickets and pissing them off.
And sitting on the subway having people rap at him.
Oh my god,
aggressively.
that was so funny.
Which was one of the funniest scenes in the movie.
But once he's freed and the baseball guy has started going on somewhat of a killing spree, because at this point he just decides that he's committed to the whole idea, and he's just like, fuck this, everybody's gonna die.
Yeah, he's like, fuck this whole scene.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that was a really funny line. He's like, I'm so fucking sick of this whole scene. Or he says, fuck the scene, everybody dies.
So he goes on a big chase with the main character, and they end up at this guy Cicero's party, who they've been mentioning all night as having like a competing Halloween party nearby.
It's like a Halloween party /
gallery
event, and he's got like this really pretentious performance art kind of piece
called like People of the Subway or something.
Yeah, it's like still life or performance art as still life, with just all of these people sitting perfectly still in a room wearing weird outfits.
Yeah, topless girls with body paint and nipple piercings. And like on the wall there is just like a piece of paper that says art with a question mark next to it.
Which of course just goes to show like what is art, what defines art, which is the eternal question. And I thought that was really a very funny touch to put in that room, is just like, art?
I love how like on the nose it was with that stuff, because it feels like something you would totally see in like an NYU.
I like
type of thing.
The part earlier before all this happens where Alexander tells his drug dealer to go get a big bag of crank. he's like, if we're gonna do this, I want to be hopped up on crank. So I'll stall them. You go do that. And while he's leaving, he's like, before we get underway, I'm going to recite Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven in its entirety.
And he just goes off on it.
Yeah, he just starts going. This movie is full of really punchy, funny shit like that.
During the chase scene, as the baseball guy's chasing him, Macon Blair, wakes up with his face half melted and starts joining in on the chase, but he's carrying around the chainsaw from before, but this time he has a very, very long extension cord.
But it's not plugged in. He's just running around with the chainsaw unplugged.
Right. Oh,
and once
that moment he finds an outlet.
Once he gets to that rooftop party, and he has that moment where he's like looking at the string lights, and he like follows them down to the outlet, and he's like, ah! And he goes and unplugs them and plugs the chainsaw in.
Yeah, well, the thing is, he's still fucking hammered from all that moonshine.
He's still drunk, and his face is all melted, one eye burned shut.
Yeah, so he plugs it in and almost immediately just falls off of the roof.
Meanwhile, our protagonist is in that performance art room with the baseball guy who has killed all of the people with an axe and is coming to kill the protagonist when Macon Blair falls past the window, and the chainsaw doesn't come unplugged. So the protagonist just pulls it in through the window by its cord and starts it up and very gruesomely drives it into the baseball guy's face.
Yeah, I love how gory that scene was with him just like chopping open the dude's face.
Unlike Bucket of Blood, there is way more than just a bucket of blood in this movie.
I had one thing that because it is much goofier and more lighthearted than Blue Ruin or Green Room, but the violence in this movie, when it does happen, I think it carries over a lot of the same
Absolutely.
things from those where it's very like awkward and real and drawn out, like
Visceral.
well, like the photographer guy, when he gets shot in the head, he doesn't die immediately. He's angry. He's like, "Oh, what the fuck?" As he's getting like,
Well, yeah,
shut
I think
up
at
more
one
and
point,
more.
he's like, "Can't you just let me finish?"
Right.
Like he's still trying to finish taking pictures as he's getting shot multiple times in the head. But that is something that Jeremy Saulnier does really well. Is like the violence is extremely graphic and visceral, but it also feels real, like disturbingly so.
Because the reactions to I mean either the people committing it or the ones that are getting attacked, like it isn't like punched up or anything. It's not meant to like look any more effective than just sort of like that. Like when the first girl, she falls and hits her head, like it's just that daziness, and before
Right,
the death,
where
it's
she
very...
where she doesn't really realize what's happened. Like she's standing there with this big oozing hole in her head, and they're all just like standing there looking at her. She's just like, huh? What? And then just like falls over. And after the protagonist leaves, there's that great moment where a couple people come into the room and they see all these murdered people and blood splattered everywhere, and they're like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Performance artist, still life. And then the protagonist walks all the way home. He gets like a bowl of cereal, or no, he gets a bowl of leftover candy corn and the jug of milk, and he goes into the living room and the cat is still sitting in the chair, and it repeats that moment where it just cuts back and forth between them 3 times. He's just like, please get up, Mr. Lancelot or Sir Lancelot. And the cat finally does. And so he just sits down with his milk and his candy corn and turns on the TV, still in his costume, still covered in blood. And then it ends. And I think it's the perfect bookend to that movie.
The movie's super short. It's only like 70 minutes, but like it doesn't feel too short. You know?
No, it doesn't. Like it feels like a feature film, much more so than Bucket of Blood does, which does feel short and quick. This one, it feels longer, not in a bad way. I do think that like the first 30 minutes is so funny and so punchy that there is a little bit of a somewhat of a lull.
Well, I think it's the inherent flaw of the premise. You know, if you have artists that are too pretentious and full of themselves to even go through and kill this guy, you're gonna have scenes where they're just doing drugs and playing extreme truth or dare, you know?
Right, and just like drawling endless platitudes and bullshit.
Even those scenes didn't bother me too much though, because they were so funny.
Yeah, and I think that there's some poignant criticism there, or a commentary, I should say, and I don't think it's really too much of a detriment to the movie, but it's, at least for me, a noticeable change of pace, whereas up till that point, like, the really sharp, funny wittiness is like just coming at you rapid fire with the setup, and then it kind of slows down and then picks up at the end.
Yeah, I would say once Alexander decides that they're going to wait until the witching hour to all stab the dude is when it really slows down, and you feel those like 6 hours that they have to wait.
I would not say that part of the movie is boring. I think that would be going too far, but it's a noticeable lull, I think. But overall, the movie's short enough that it doesn't bog it down too much. But that is, I would say the middle is the weakest part of the movie. Do you want to rate this, or do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I'm fine if we want to just jump into it.
Yeah, let's rate this.
Okay.
So maybe I could. I appreciated more things in this movie. One, because it's more recent than Bucket of Blood is, so it's easier to relate to that the attitudes of these artists. And
Well, yeah, they reminded me a lot of a TA I had freshman year in my sound class, who was a grad student from NYU,
And made it very clear that he was.
and he like he was these people.
and that's my second thing as well. Just I know some people that that they're artists around in New York, and hey, it's I'm sure it's a tough thing to try and be an artist in one of like the biggest cities in the world, where there's guaranteed to be like 1,000 other people trying to do the same thing, and 100 are probably better than you. And I've watched some of the videos that my friends have made, and this movie just reminded me a lot of all that, where it's just very like obnoxious and thinks that it's
Self-serious.
Yeah, self-serious, more thinks it's more clever than it actually is. And it seems like it just did a great representation of that. And not just to say, oh, they're just arrogant art people, but that it comes from these places of like deep insecurities.
Yeah,
in their lives.
how do you get ahead in such a competitive space, you know?
Right, and if they even enjoy doing the things that they do, because
Right, like when the Blade Runner chick says that she hates art, she is an artist and she hates art. I
Yeah.
think that that's an interesting perspective, and I think it's kind of true for a lot of these things.
Yeah, no, and it's that really great line that this movie walks, where this group, their collective, like they're all bad, and they all secretly like hate each other, even though they're all like within close vicinity of one another. They're all just liars, but
They're supposed to be friends, but they talk shit about each other's
exactly.
work.
But that you can sort of get why they are the way they are, and I think that made it a much more enjoyable critique of like the art culture than Bucket of Blood for me, even though I like Bucket of Blood as well. And yeah, that good old just the New York attitudes of it all, and just hanging out in a warehouse to make your projects. It really stuck with me. And so I'm gonna give it a 4.5, because I think the only problems I may have with it is that the violence might be at odds with the lighter tone. Even though I think that can work really well, just to show like, hey, this violence is real, and it's like we get so sensationalized with stuff. To have like someone die on screen should have more of a oomph. But yeah, again, that might be just problems for other people. I'd say 4.5. I wish that it was. I wish that there was maybe a little more length to it. Because it all takes place in just this one location, but I think that it really. I mean, it could have been a full length, and I think it would have been great as a full length movie. So as it is, I guess it left me wanting more. But I had a really enjoyable time watching it, so highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm about in the same vein. I think for me its length is fine. I already talked about how it starts to drag for me a little bit in the middle, but I think it's super funny, like laugh out loud kind of stuff mixed with some really macabre graphic violence that doesn't really feel at odds for me, because the humor is often so dark. It feels tonally consistent with the violence and some of the grittiness for me, but overall an extremely funny movie, very fun, well acted across the board. Most of these actors have not really done anything else, which is a shame because I think everybody did a fantastic job.
Besides Macon Blair.
Besides Macon Blair, of course, he has the most successful career after this, and I think it's because of his close proximity to Jeremy Saulnier. It's sort of enabled him to branch out a little bit on his own and now direct his own films, which I think is cool. I like him a lot as an actor and a director, and I'm excited for more Jeremy Saulnier because I love this movie and Blue Ruin and Green Room. I think he's definitely somebody to keep a lookout for in the future. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. Funny, exciting, well done for such a low budget. Yeah, just a solid movie all around.
I'm really glad we paired these movies together because I feel like they're very similar in their critique of the art world. With Bucket of Blood, it's a normal man who kind of gets enabled to kill people through this art world, while Murder Party is kind of the opposite, where the art world is enabled to try to murder a dude for the art. So I think it's a really cool juxtaposition between the two, seeing how both sides are kind of coming short because of the art. And because of the ego that comes with the art and the self-seriousness that comes with the art. With Murder Party, I found it super funny. I love how sharp and witty the dialogue is. I think the gruesome, visceral gore actually works for me because it feels like a send-up to horror movies where early in the movie, it's established on Halloween and you have all these spooky things, but the movie is kind of light throughout. So it's kind of cool to see a little bit of horror payoff in there. I think it takes a lot of the themes of Bucket of Blood and kind of shows a little bit more complexity to them, especially with the insecurity of the artist's characters and how, the art has made them jaded or kind of distant from others or narcissistic, especially narcissistic. So I thought a lot of that was really cool. But more than anything, this movie flies by at 70 minutes. It never overstays its welcome. It definitely makes you feel like wanting more, I just thought this was an incredible movie. Definitely check it out. Definitely check out Blue Ruin and Green Room as well. They're all incredible. But overall, I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5.
Well, that gives Murder Party an average rating of 4.3 pods out of 5. Both these movies definitely worth seeing. A little bit of an unorthodox theme for us, but I'm very glad we decided to do it because I think it provoked a good discussion and brings up some of those age-old questions like, what the fuck is art? We don't have a game this week.
Impromptu, to choose our next episode, pick a number between 1 and 10, Eugene.
Ooh, I will go I'll go for 7. It's my lucky number.
I didn't know we were doing this.
Pick a number between 1 and 10.
I'm gonna say 4.
We will be covering 3 movies from 1974 in our next episode.
Oh boy.
Oh.
This is news to me.
Okay.
Well, in our next full-length episode,
Yes,
we've got another mini pod coming at you next week. I believe we're gonna do Veronica. Yeah,
Yep,
is that what we decided we're doing
Veronica.
next? The Netflix film directed by Paco Plaza, who directed the first 3 Rec movies. I've only seen the first one. A film I like quite a bit.
I'm excited to see what's in store for us. I don't know anything about the plot, and I'm kind of gonna try to keep myself separate from it. I think
I saw the
completely
trailer.
unaware.
I've had it recommended to me by a couple of people. It seems to be just like The Conjuring, but in Spain. based on one of those based on a true story, demonic possession type of movies. I've heard good things about it, and I've been scrolling past it on Netflix and not a lot. So
I'm hoping for the best. I mean, with demonic possession movies, I feel like they've been done so much and so badly most of the time. That
they've been done to death.
To get a good one is always a pleasant surprise.
Not to play into our ongoing joke of liking movies more because they're in a foreign language, but I'm hoping that with Veronica that a foreign perspective, like a different cultural perspective, is going to bring something fresh to the demonic possession subgenre. We'll see. Maybe I'm going to like this movie more because it's in a different language.
Ooh, a ghost.
Ghosts. Well, if you like the show, you can leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. We know you guys are out there. We've seen the numbers. We know that there are actually people listening to this show.
We've seen the numbers, and they spell disaster for you at Sacrifice.
The numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you at Sacrifice. But yeah, like, if you're one of our regular listeners, just take, 30 seconds out of your day to leave us a rating and review. That would really help us climb in the charts a little bit and help spread the love of spooky movies.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, comments, disagreements, anything you want to tell us, feel free to email us at podpeoplepod@gmail.com. Unfortunately, we don't have an email question of the week.
Yeah, we definitely would like to start doing a question of the week segment at the end of some of these episodes. So send us in some questions or even comments. Give us something to talk about for a few minutes. You can also follow the show at Facebook or Twitter at PodPeoplePod. Leave us comments and questions and stuff there. We check those sites pretty regularly, so interact with us there. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome.
You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
I'm gonna do a little bit of a side plug for another project Ben and I are working on with Light Arc Studios. We're starting to come to a head on this new game we're working on. Follow us on Twitter at Light Arc Studios, LIGHTARC Studios. We're putting out content every couple of weeks, showing some concept art for the game, and we're building up a demo. So if you're a gamer and you're interested in that stuff, definitely
stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Especially if you like strategy games or Lovecraft.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah, try the wheatgrass pancakes. They're good for your digestive
the garbanzo
system,
bean
but be
omelets.
wary of raisins with preservatives in them.
Yeah, you don't want to faint and fall onto a piece of metal and bust your head open. Definitely wouldn't want to do that. And if you happen to kill somebody's cat, just tell them about it. Don't put it in clay or nothing like that.
Yeah, come on, all those people out there who are killing cats and then molding them with clay and then trying to sell them as pieces of art, just be honest. Because at the end of the day, we're all looking for the truth. And isn't that the greatest art?
Guys, but what am I supposed to do with this dog statue?
Oh, no.
It's been eyeing me all night. It's been giving me that crazy look.
I call it dog with brick.
Well, thank you as always for listening. We hope you enjoyed this thoughtful examination of the art culture. Catch us again next week with a mini pod of Veronica. I'm Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm Ben Sheets.
And I am Eugene, yeah.
And
they haven't got rid of me yet.
And we are the Pod People. Thanks again for listening. And, as you go to bed tonight, ask yourself, what is art?
What is art?
And what would you do for your art? Would you kill a man for your art?